I'll tell you when we're live. And we are live. So, welcome everyone who is jumping on right now. Today is going to be an interesting interview because I actually have my boss on with me, and it's not normal that you would see an actuary interview their boss. But I have this channel, and I've been wanting to interview him for a long time. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So welcome, Kyle. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Very excited to chat.
Yeah, and Kyle is a managing partner at Edrington Health, which we will be talking about, which is now a division of Health Management Associates as of the last, what, has it been 2 months now? Almost 2 months?
July 1st.
July 1st. So uh, let's just get started with a little bit of background about yourself. I actually haven't even really heard this, but I'm just curious how you got started with actuarial, what got you interested, and kind of where did you go to school, and how did that all come about?
Yeah, so like a lot of people, I had no idea what I wanted to do as a career, and it took a long time to figure that out. Uh, I started at U of A in Arizona uh, with goals of being an engineer. They have an engineering math program, which is basically specialized engineering on just like the math stuff, which was kind of cool. That was my first of four majors. And so I started there. Then I said, this isn't for me. I want to be a pediatrician. And so I'm like, if I want to be a pediatrician, I got to study biology. So I was a molecular cellular bio major for about a year. And then I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. And I said, well, I like math. Maybe I want to be a college professor. And so I had just like a math degree with that aspiration for a little bit. And then I don't know how common this is, but there's a little red textbook that we had it's like the 101 proofs class. And I have nightmares about that book still. And I realized that the like theoretical side of math, which is foundational for being a professor, was not for me. I like to actually see more application than theory.
Yep.
And so I'm like, okay, well, can't be a college professor anymore. But now it's like 4 years into being in college, and it's like, you got to figure something out. So I said, okay, maybe I want to be a high school math teacher because that would be really cool. But obviously there's like financial considerations for that profession for sad reasons.
Yep.
And so that kind of got put to the wayside. It's like, I think 6 years into being in college, it's like, you just got to graduate with something. So I had all these different courses from different focus areas.
But you were probably doing math kind of all along the way.
And that's what it was. It's like I had basically all the courses to get a math degree. And it's like, okay, well, we'll just I have a degree in math generically.
Yeah.
And so that was just to get out of school. And then I said, well, I've already thought about different teaching jobs, and that's not going to be for me right now. What else can you do with a math degree? So it was I think a semester before I was supposed to graduate, I went on Google and typed in like, what can you do with a math degree? And the number one answer that came up was the actuarial profession, which I had never heard of. And so at that point I was probably 24 and clearly didn't have the foundation or knowledge to have been taking exams and knowing what that profession's like. So it was like a crash course in the very end. And even though I saw this cool job online, I had no idea how to even work in that field.
Yeah.
So I think that there are a few main employers in the Phoenix area, but there was one new company that was just kind of starting up as a offshoot. It's not the right word, but a couple folks from a larger company started something new, and they had no help, and they didn't know if they needed help yet. But I just figured, if there's someone out there who will actually employ me in this field that I know nothing about, and I have my degree, we'll just see where it goes. So I stumbled into it.
Had you moved back to the Phoenix area at that point and you were looking around, or did you stay out in Tucson for a while?
No, I was in Phoenix at the time and knew that I wanted to stay in this area. So remote work wasn't a thing in 2000. This was 2007. So
Yep.
you obviously had to get a job where you're going to live.
Yep.
And so it was just, I've been very fortunate over my career to just have good things happen and good timing happen. And there just happened to be this opportunity of a really cool thing, and they needed help, and I needed a job, and it worked out. And then
That's
as
awesome.
I worked there longer, I just realized that it's a really cool job. And
Yeah.
I wish I knew about it when I was 15.
Yep.
And so I'm excited about all those opportunities that younger folks have right
Yeah.
now.
That sounds similar to me actually, because I switched around. I was engineering, I was math, I was physics, computer science, and then I just ended with math because it was like same sort of thing where each one wasn't quite right, but I liked math all along the way. And it was like my senior year when I heard about actuarial science, and it was like, oh, that sounds interesting. But as you know, of course, I went back to school and all this other stuff. But um, yeah, so it's kind of similar story. And I forgot about work from home. I guess I'm trying to think. I think the first time I ever worked from home would have been 2010 or 11, and I remember I was super excited about it because it was kind of novel at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I got excited about whatever rinky-dink tablet was around in
Yeah,
2010 that you could actually see your screen at the office.
yeah,
And I thought that that would mean that I could work at home, but in reality, no. Like the infrastructure just wouldn't support it
yeah.
until honestly just a couple of years ago. Because even when we had solutions in the work environment, they were just too slow to be efficient. So
Right.
you'd just rather go sit at your desk if it was otherwise an option.
Yeah, yeah. It's a good point. That's crazy. Hasn't even been around that long. So I wanted to ask you, you kind of alluded to your first actuarial job. What kind of stuff did you work on when you first jumped into it, and maybe give everyone an idea of the fact that it's healthcare, the type of, did you do any math? What kind of stuff did you work on?
My first 2 or 3 weeks, and I can appreciate this more since I've been in the industry and been an employer, but effectively you're kind of worthless when you first start.
Yep.
And so it's all about finding tasks that add value. And the task that added value when I first started as an intern in the summer was going through a bunch of paper filed cost reports, Medicare cost reports from like hundreds of hospitals in the country that were used in a different project and just organizing them in a file cabinet. It was a filing job
Wow.
effectively for
Yeah.
like 3 weeks. And, you know, someone had to do it. And often in many jobs, and especially consulting, you just have to find the job that adds value and then learn something from it. And this was part of a really big project that was interesting because essentially it was like a big court hearing process, for lack of a more appropriate legal phrase, where in a state there was an initiative that was supposed to save money to the system. And there was this program it started, and the program was funded by how much money it saved. So they had to have somebody independent come out and figure out how much savings had been accumulated so that you could basically justify and pay for this cool program. And
Yeah.
so it became more of a hearing process because you have different stakeholders who have, you know, skin in the game in terms of what savings are and what this program does and all this kind of fun stuff. So my first real job, I had no idea that it was probably the rare scenario where you're actually sitting in a courtroom and there are lawyers talking about emails and there's lawyers talking about Excel files. And I just thought like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten into?
Yes.
Is somebody going to be auditing everything I do?
Right.
But it was actually really good training because to this day, everything I put in writing, I'm like, well, someday somebody might open this in a court setting. Do I want to say it that certain way?
Yep.
Or just the general due diligence and credibility you do in your work? Because even if you don't think that it has that application, there's so much pressure and reliance on what we do in the field that it has to be credible and appropriate. So
Yep.
it was a great learning experience, but it was intimidating because of the setting, and we only had a couple people in the company, so it forced me to understand things quickly and kind of be uncomfortable and still be okay.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a company of just 3, 4, 5 people, you're interfacing with everybody real time. And so you don't have time to think about, oh my gosh, I know nothing about what I'm doing, but I'm in a room with people who do, and I just don't want to look like a moron.
Right.
So my whole first year was just like try to figure out something that was helpful and don't look like a moron. uh,
And
so
it didn't scare you off too much because obviously you stayed with it. So did like how long were you doing that court stuff for? Did you eventually, after a year or so, just start getting into actuarial work, or were you doing a lot of paperwork for a long time?
the 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 analyses underpinning the court stuff was very actuarial, very statistical. Even we consulted with a like PhD economist to do some really cool regression things and
Oh wow.
a lot more stats focused. So that was neat exposure, and that specific project happened for I believe 3 years. So that was like the big project over the summer for a couple of years, and then outside of that, we did a lot of work with state Medicaid agencies and like understanding how to assess risk and build a capitation rate, which is an amount the health plan receives in payment from the government.
Yep.
And I was just fortunate because it's so overwhelming. It takes years to even be able to talk the language sometimes. And so we were surrounded by a lot of great leaders who could compartmentalize projects. And so even though there's 10,000 things going on, if you can identify, one or two things at a time and make it manageable,
Yeah.
that was really important. So a lot of the foundation was actuarial stuff, but it would be like, how do you understand trends, which is like understanding how costs go up or down in a year, or how do you look at one new benefit that's coming out and understand what that's worth. So you can get overwhelmed extremely quickly. But the first couple of years is just, like I said, like managing your own chaos.
Yep.
And learn and having a good attitude and learning as much as you possibly can, and not getting too discouraged about trying to conquer the world on day one, basically.
Yep. So I think I had someone once tell me when I first started out and felt over. Well, the crazy thing about the profession is you can feel overwhelmed pretty much any day, even if you're experienced. But but it's like one of those things where you're like constantly learning, and then you look back and you're like, wow, I've gotten way better than when I first started. But I remember when I first started, someone told me like, just keep going.
I just had this opportunity to effectively work part-time and be made whole financially and be around for my daughter's first year of life. And I never knew if it was going to continue. I just knew that it was something cool that I wanted to do. And at the end of the day, we just every like month something new would come up. And so for a while it was just, okay, I'm just this dude who has a little bit of work, but now I need somebody to review it. I need somebody to help. And so we were able to add, a person or two here or there that helped add stability to what we were doing. And it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years ago at most that I made a very conscious decision that it was a business and not just a solo dude consulting with help. And the difference between those two things is immense in terms of the supports that you have to do, the planning you have to do, taking a little tiny bit of risk, because I think most folks in our profession are pretty risk averse. And so I was always hesitant to have a business, but then we just had so many opportunities that it just kind of spun. And so for years and years, it was always just managing the chaos of keeping everybody at home happy, keeping everybody we work with happy, and then taking on the responsibility. This is the problem of having a business, is that you're just not accountable to yourself. You're accountable to whoever you bring into that little universe. So it's an immense responsibility for making sure that the things that you value in your life are given to everybody in the office, especially if they value them too. And if they value something else, that's where your mind has to go. And so I always wanted to make sure that we had capacity where somebody's life wasn't negatively affected because I made a bad decision. And so that stress is probably the hardest part about building something up.
I believe that.
And the easy soundbite is I never want to hire somebody that I had to fire because I was dumb,
Right.
because that's just not fair. So that just the the difference between a business that has planning and resources and all that stuff, that takes time and money and stress. And I just deferred to personal stress for not it's like taking all the responsibility on yourself, and being the person that's working at 2 a.m. if that has to happen, because I want to make sure that if John Doe is with us, they're not the one working at 2 a.m. because if they are, that's my fault. So that's the hardest part.
So on that note, I'm curious, like, because you got this thing going, and you were kind of an individual doing all this, and you had time with your family, and then it was like growing a lot bigger, and you had more responsibility. Were you having a ton of nights, like 2 a.m. nights, working on stuff? And was that stressful with, like, you had this time with your family? Were they upset about that, or were they like, okay, this is going somewhere? I'm just curious what those kind of challenges were like.
The good part is that I had flexibility. So if I didn't have a deadline or a client call or something at 3 p.m, I could go home and nobody would be looking for me. At the same time, nobody's there if you have something that you need to do. So I think that the burden was really borne by my family, but it wasn't necessarily during the time they were awake. It would be like, well, why is my husband or why is my dad going to work at 10 o'clock at night? Do they have to worry because I'm not home in bed and driving? Like, so it's more of that kind of stuff. And then obviously personally, you can only do that for so long. So it was stressful, but my main goal was to put the stress on myself over anybody else, because at the end of the day, when you have a company, that's what you're creating. You define your own world and you create those good opportunities, and you also create the stress. And so we had to get big enough where we had enough infrastructure to handle all the ups and downs. That's the problem with a business, is like nobody is consistently the same level of intensity every day of the year, at least in our profession. And so how do I figure out how to hire somebody when we just have a really bad week or a really bad month in terms of workload? Because what are they going to do for the other 10 months of the year? And so that was the hardest part, is trying to figure out when enough is enough. And if that bad week or bad month turned into a bad 3 months, then in my mind now it's time to bring somebody else in, because I just can't physically do it.
Definitely.
But that was the challenge and the mentality. So thankfully, I think everyone else was kind of made whole. I just got some bags under my eyes and some gray hairs.
You're looking good for your age, Kyle. So I think you've done well.
Reference, I'm 74.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I don't know if you could hear those dogs in the background. There's some dogs that are like barking like crazy outside my window. I've got like, outside this apartment complex, over on the side, there's this little dog walking area, and sometimes they go crazy over there.
Well, in the office, 99% of the time when we're on a call, it's engaging and exciting. 1% of the time, it's not. And so we might, play office bingo. And one of those little squares might say someone random's dog is barking in the background. So if anyone's playing office bingo right now, you get that square courtesy of Paul Tabor.
That has actually happened at the office. It is true. I can't even remember where I was at. Oh yeah, because we were talking about you starting the business and you kind of talked about some of the challenges, but for yourself, what were some of the benefits? Maybe you alluded to that, which was getting even the flexibility of kind of working when you want to work. But what would you say is the greatest benefit of starting this?
So it's the initial flexibility of being able to control your own chaos. And then there's really cool things that happen as you get bigger. And it feels really rewarding when you have an employee or 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever it is, and you can see that they're able to be happy and they're able to develop a career and they're able to buy a house or do whatever they need to do that makes their life cool. And it's because of the things that we're doing in the office. And obviously the work that they put in to do that too. But that part I didn't think would be as rewarding. I didn't think about it initially, but that was really neat. And that made the stressful times a little easier, trying to think about the bigger picture and the future and all that kind of stuff. So that was neat. And then obviously the flexibility of not having someone yell at me if I'm not in the office at 12:30, which can happen.
Definitely. And yeah, like you also, I mean, I feel like at our office we have a really good group of people. How did you find, like, what was your standard when you interviewed people and you were looking for people? Um, of all the places I've been. I mean, I know I'm talking to my boss right now and I'm saying, "Yeah, this is so great," but it truly is a great company. Like I love working here, and I'm curious how you found the people that you found and what your standard was.
So the first thing is I got super lucky in terms of finding people that would take a little bit of a leap of faith at the right time. But for me, my philosophy, and like I'll get a resume, and I don't want to offend anybody who spends an hour on the resume, but you can look at it in 5 seconds. And honestly, on a resume, I just look for typos because it kind of shows a lack of attention to detail. But I've never cared what somebody's technical foundation was. If it's an actuarial role and they want to be an actuary, I never care if you have an exam. And so people disagree with me on that. But I feel like you hire the person and you hire the attitude and you grow together and it'll work out. And so if somebody is interested in a career in this field and I'm talking to them, usually it's more conversational. Can they hold a conversation? Are they interested about the work? Do they have a good attitude? It's all the more personal level skills and not the technical skills.
Right.
And I think that that's helped grow the culture of the company we have, because the area that I've been fortunate is I've found people who have both, and that's extremely rare. Both being the technical side of knowing what the heck they're doing, and they also have a great attitude and they're great people. So nobody wants to go to work and like be scared of talking to somebody. Yes. Or be like just having a toxic culture. And so that prioritization of the person over the skill set has been like number one, but it's also challenging because there might be 20 people in the world that fit that bill. And so that was the hard part about the business is I don't want to sacrifice on just hiring somebody unless it's going to be in their best interest and our best interest, and we think it's going to be a long-term fit. And so how do you manage like opportunities and growth with a limited pool of people? And so when you are just starting out and you're just like a dude who has an email address and wants to hire somebody you don't know, it's not going to go very well. Yeah. Because usually the people that are strong in what they do, they know that and they have opportunities and options. So for the first couple of years, it was just like finding folks who have the right mindset and want to do something cool together. And now this is one of the great things about where we've come and also where we can go with our transition company-wise, is that now we have a little more flexibility where if somebody's at a different company and it's not the same risk of going somewhere that has 2 people, right? Now we're part of a larger, cooler machine that still has those same values. And so that's really exciting because it enables us to get past the almost like the credibility phase of where we were so that we can engage folks more broadly. And that was really, really hard. And we just, like I said, got lucky and stumbled into people like yourself who were just happened to be looking at the exact right time for the exact thing that we needed. And we just made it work.
Yeah. Kyle and I have talked about this before. That was kind of crazy because, as many of my viewers know, I went back to school for my master's, and for me, it was more just like, I need to make some extra money over the summer. I wonder if anyone would hire a part-time actuary. And I'm like, that's kind of rare. And someone had told me about EHC. So then I met Kyle that way, and the rest is history. So now I'm working more for this company, and it's fantastic. But
and that was perfect because at that point in time, we were doing just fine. We had great opportunities, but I didn't know that we could support an actuarial hire full time. Yeah. So in our mind, it's like, okay, there's somebody out there who's interested. That's obstacle number one. Obstacle number two is that being part-time, it's flexible.
Yep.
So if workload goes up or down, like that, that's easier to go through. And then for folks that know Paul, like he's one of the easiest people to talk to, a great communicator, like all the things we value in terms of consulting and office culture at the same time. So it was just, like I said, very, very lucky. Sometimes the stars align. I have a
Yeah.
philosophy like if you treat people well, if you're honest with them, good things happen. And I just could be on a run of luck. But I think that's important too. Is that
Yeah, I
uh,
mean, yeah, and I appreciate that. It's funny because I had people had always told me that they thought I would like consulting, but I just never ended up trying it out until recently. So, um, and it is interesting. And actually, there's two things I wanted to ask you something. I'm going to ask you about consulting first, and then I wanted to go back and ask about the HMA acquisition as well. But on the whole consulting note, a lot of people are aware that there's kind of a difference in the actuarial space between being a consultant or working internally at an insurance company. A lot of big insurance companies have their own actuarial departments, and I don't know percentage wise how many are in consulting versus traditional insurance, but for those who are kind of just getting into the profession, do you have any recommendations on like which route they should go into?
the so I've only worked in consulting, but we have worked a lot with health plans for a while, and so I have a little bit of a perspective. And the stereotype, which is true and false depending on where you work, is that in the consulting world, it's usually more of a demanding job. It's harder to prioritize and find time to study
Hmm.
when you're working more than 40 hours in a week. That doesn't mean that if you work at a health plan, you're only going to work 40 hours, because that is definitely not true.
Yeah.
Well, I think in our industry, if you're good at your job, people are going to want you to work. And so what I would prioritize for somebody who's just starting is just to know what works with your life. And if you want to focus on being a credential actuary and get your exams done, then you need to make sure the company you're working for prioritizes that as well and will allow you to do that. At the same time, there's trade-offs, because if you are working more, it's like you get 2 years of experience in one. And if you want to climb the ladder faster in whatever company you are, unfortunately, if you're working a lot, that you gain more experience.
Yep.
And so, as a person, you got to balance when you want to like pursue different things in your life, and that probably changes every few years. And so, I think the stereotype is probably true more often than not, that working in consulting is more time demanding. I think the other stereotype, which is that it's more varied in what you do. So I can come to the office and have no idea what I'm going to work on that day for good and bad reasons. And in the health plan world, stereotypically, you may have one functional area that you kind of become an expert in. And I think in consulting, you almost don't want to be an expert in one spot. You want to be pretty good in 10 things,
Yep.
as opposed to an expert in one. And so that gives you a broader mindset, I think, but I'm totally biased. And so it just depends on where you want to go with your career and how you want to balance your family. And that's where it works perfectly for either.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been in consulting for too long yet, because, like I said, my only experience has been at your company. But I would say that's true. What you just said, that in a traditional insurance role, you're going to be kind of on a team that maybe works on just group pricing or individual pricing, or maybe you work on just reserving, and you're just doing one set thing. Whereas consulting, um, there's a whole variety of projects because a lot of clients have a lot of different needs. So I think that you can tend to work on a lot more and also learn a lot more in consulting. Um,
mhm.
Not to say that you can learn a ton in traditional insurance as well, but so I would agree with what you're saying. But someone starting off, yeah, that can be a tough one. Like, how do you balance the exams with work? Because if you start in consulting, you could end up getting really good at stuff. So maybe that's better. But maybe you want to focus on exams. So it is a
Yeah,
tough.
and it's tricky even today as we manage everyone's expectations, because it's extremely important to me that we're not a company that has everybody working 80 hours a week,
Hmm.
because that doesn't fulfill most people's goals. And so the challenge with consulting is that I have power over maybe 3 months from now. I have power over probably 1 or 2 months from now. But what happens today and whatever file drill is happening today can change that. And so what I tell our folks internally is that we want a nice, stable 40, 50-hour job like everyone in the world wants. There may be days that doesn't happen, but we need to make sure that we're offsetting that. And if I'm not doing a good job at that, or your manager's not doing a good job at that, then you have to advocate for yourself too, and you have to have a little more initiative in consulting, because you can get swallowed up. And so that's just been something important to me, because I've lived both ends of the spectrum, and I know that there's enough time in the day, and I know that there's enough resources in the system to support a non-chaotic schedule.
Definitely.
Say it that way. But when you're in consulting, you do have to realize that there's going to be a 12-hour day. It's going to happen. We just have to control for that. And the better that management does in planning, the less that's likely to happen.
Yep.
And nobody's figured out that secret sauce yet, but people try.
Definitely. So I know you started this consulting firm in, was it 2014?
Mm-hmm.
And just recently, we were acquired by another consulting firm called Health Management Associates, and we've been kind of alluding to that a little bit throughout this talk. What was that process like for you? Because not many people are actuaries, started their own company, and then also merged with another firm. So you kind of have a unique perspective, and I'm just wondering what that process was like for you.
Extremely stressful. And it's because I'm accountable to so many different stakeholders, right? So I'm accountable to my family, first and foremost. Then I'm accountable to folks in our office. And then I'm accountable to folks we work with today. And then I'm accountable to not just today, but what are the opportunities 5 or 10 or 20 years from now for everybody? And so I'm also very protective of the culture and the environment and making sure that everyone's happy with their life. And so just like I was saying, I don't want to hire somebody in the past that I made a dumb decision and we had to let go. It's also like, I don't want to make a decision that changes all these people's lives for the worse, because that would suck.
Yep.
And so it's a long process of just understanding the fit in the culture. And it wasn't even that there were reservations. It's just we have to understand for due diligence that not only for the acquiring company, it makes sense, but also for the acquired company, that for everybody in the office and everybody that we work with, it's a good thing. And so you can't figure that out in a day. And the process to do that is a roller coaster.
Yep.
And it's probably, in some scenarios, could take years to do. And what really settled it on my end was thinking about people in the office and knowing the responsibility and stress of having a company. I didn't know that I was going to be able to have a 30 or 50 or 100 or whatever the number is person company, because that takes a lot of risk and stress and time. And I'm already maxed out on those dimensions.
For sure.
And so being able to think about the upward momentum of somebody in the office, if someone's just starting and there's a 10-person company, do they have something that they can think is cool to grow into? And I don't know that I could have answered that positively. And you don't want to just say, oh, well, that'll figure itself out. And so for every kind of person in the system, there are differences. There's always going to be differences. But for an employee and upward growth, being part of a larger community and having access to more things and having more kind of areas of growth was cool. And so it's just a matter of saying how many cool things are in one hand and how many not even not cool, but concerns are in the other hand, and do they outweigh each other? And so obviously they outweighed each other, because we are super excited about the opportunities going forward, but it's just so stressful because it's not just about what I want to do, because it's everybody else in the infrastructure that I felt a responsibility toward making sure was going to be okay. And in a transaction like that, you can't talk about it 9 months when you're debating it, because it just logistically doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so you bear a lot of that responsibility on yourself And it just, I'm glad, I'm glad to be in a point now where we know where we're going. And I think if you would have asked my wife or family in June or May, like I was worn down.
I believe that. Yeah, no, that's I can only imagine because I mean you had the stress of obviously running the company and keeping it going, but I'm sure that that process was also quite stressful. But like you said, I think it's only going to lead to more opportunities plus more security for the company and all sorts of things. Um, and on that note, I know you had a shameless plug on LinkedIn about how you're hiring. If you want to say anything about that, you can feel free to say it on the YouTube. If anyone's looking, is there anything specifically that you're looking for, and how should they contact you?
So thanks, Paul.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Honestly, um, my biggest job in life right now is to figure out how to manage the future and everyone's expectations. Those are expectations inside our office, at my house, of our clients, of our new clients, of our new organization. Like, it's very challenging. And for hiring, I need to make sure that folks know what they're doing and folks have a complementary mindset to the culture that we've created. Because what I don't want to do is, even though we probably have the work to support it, I don't want to hire 10 people tomorrow.
Yep.
Because that can introduce layers of chaos to other people in the office. It's not fair, or it could compromise the work we're already doing with people. And so we have to take a very measured approach. And I used to kind of, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but hire from the bottom up, because I knew that I could manage the work, and we had a couple folks in the office who could manage the work, but I didn't always have the analytic resources to do like supports and things. And it's also really, 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 really hard to find people that know and have experience in the little area of the universe that we're experts in.
Right.
And so it was easier for me to manage the workload and the projects and things and then find help. But now we have new opportunities, different. We have new clients and new projects, and they're tangential to what we're already doing, but I'm almost hiring top down. So we're prioritizing anybody who has specifically public like program, Medicaid, Medicare, actuarial experience, ideally working with health plans. And there just aren't that many people out there. And so that doesn't mean that there aren't opportunities for other folks, but as we control our chaos, it's very methodical in how we achieve that balance of not rocking our internal world and also taking advantage and helping other people who need that. So I don't have the answer for that yet. I think HMA probably wants me to have the answer for that yet, but I have to do my homework. And so I think at this point, if anybody is interested in anything, just reach out. I mean, we'd love to have a conversation. And if you're a person that has that kind of attitude that prioritizes personal like growth and flexibility and want to have a really cool job in this little area of the world, then we're happy to chat with anybody, honestly.
Awesome. I know we're at 10:40 now, so we got just a little bit. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions before we end this, and I have a couple fun questions at the end. But before that, just thinking about all the stuff that you've been through and the point where you're at right now, I mean, you're really in a position where you have to manage a ton of stuff. And how do you balance that with being in the weeds, being in the work? Like, you might have to get on a call, look at a project. I mean, you're a smart guy. You figure stuff out very quickly, but which do you like better, and how do you kind of balance those two things?
I really like doing stuff, but I also really like sleeping at night. And so in the early parts of EHC, I had to do a little bit of everything, because in my mind, if we mess one thing up within reason, it all disappears. We're fired from everyone. That's probably not true, but that's my mentality. And so now with the infrastructure that we've built, we have more checks and balances and people that know what they're doing. And so it's really hard for anybody in their career to trust somebody else as you kind of develop what you're doing. And so the the challenge is always making sure that you have to give up a little bit, and you have to figure out ways to broadly check the integrity of something without having spent 10 hours doing it. And that's a skill set that is very hard to develop. And unfortunately, you develop it by making mistakes over years and years and years that hopefully you catch internally.
Yep.
And so right now, I probably spend 20% of my day doing stuff that you'd think of as like real work, and 80% managing projects and giving insight on things and doing strategy calls and things like that. And it's hard to just give up the things that you love doing. Like I love going and SAS and coding, even though I suck at it, because it's just fun. And so everyone in the office just has to figure out what value they add the most. And the value I add the most is not coding in SAS, because I suck at it. It's going to take me 12 hours to do something that you might be able to do in an hour, or an analyst might be able to do in 10 minutes.
See, but just so everyone knows, Kyle likes to say that he sucks at stuff, but he really doesn't. He's really a data guru, and he just always says he sucks.
Well, I'm really good at copying what other people do and modify it, which I think is the foundation of any sort of like coding.
Yeah,
but
that's the
big philosophy is just you got to know what your role is and where you serve the most value. Because if I'm spending 12 hours in the weeds, that means that something else isn't being done that someone else is going to get compromised on, or like you just have to balance it. So yeah, everyone kind of puts the big machine together and adds value how they are, but being able to give up that full control over what is going on, because ultimately I take accountability if we make a mistake. I mean, we all take accountability as a cohesive unit, but I'm the one saying it. And so I want to minimize those things because it hurts everybody in the office.
Yeah.
And so I just don't want to be in a position where you give up too much and then you have bad outcomes. But at the same time, like it's a really, really hard balance. But that's what you learn. That's why it takes 5, 10, 15, 25 years for some people to learn how to do it. Because you got to be, you just have to have a different mindset that's hard.
Definitely. So it sounds like, I mean, you've kind of developed this mindset over the years. You've worked a lot, but I'm sure you've had some time for fun outside of work. And let's just hear what are some of the things that you like to do outside of work? What can we find Kyle doing?
I like to play basketball. I don't have as much time as I probably used to do that. Sometimes what I'll just do at night is watch old Nintendo games on Twitch, which is super nerdy. But like anything that's not very thought provoking is what I'm looking to try to figure out how to do, because I have plenty of thought at work. So playing basketball, playing with my two kids who are still young, they're 4 and 7. And then just finding an hour a day to do something mindless is tricky. And like, I got my TV up there. Like right now, during the workday, I have old Nintendo games on Twitch.
That is amazing.
That go in the background. So you just got to find something to keep yourself sane. And that's one thing that I get excited the bigger we get, because I'll have more folks to leverage that can do cool things, and it won't just be, working all day.
Yeah.
And so I'll reconnect with you on my plans in maybe 5 years once we have a little more stability and flexibility.
Sounds
but right now,
good.
every minute is hard to find.
Yep. So if you and I were to play one-on-one basketball right now, you haven't played in a while, I haven't played in a while, who's going to win?
I don't know that you would score.
Whoa. That is okay. This is gonna, everyone watching in the office, set up a time where Kyle and I play one-on-one.
It's going to be after our ping pong match.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do that first. Yeah.
Honestly, I've never seen you play basketball, and so I have no reference point. If you were to just take like an average person who thinks they're good at basketball, I'm only maybe probably like a little bit better than that. So if you think you're average, then you're going to lose. If you like are some rock star with a hidden hoops career, then we may see that bear true.
I would go with average. I like to talk smack. Now, ping pong is a different story. I'm actually good at ping pong. Basketball, I used to play when I went to Gonzaga. I played like every day, and I'm
Yeah.
short. So for reference, Kyle's quite a bit taller than me. I'm only 5'8", but I could beat guys down the court with speed. Um, that was if we're playing one on one, we're not doing full court, so I don't know. I don't know if I have that advantage anymore.
I guess we'll
So
have to see how it goes.
yeah,
I'm more comfortable in ping pong, honestly, because we've played a lot of ping pong in our day. But
so have I. So
that's
this
another story.
yeah, this needs to happen.
And
Um,
I think that you just need to up your training on basketball so you can finally make that dunking video that everyone
I
wants to see.
know. So yeah, everyone who's watching, I made that last video about 2 years ago. Can a 5'8" actuary dunk? The answer right now is no. I did about a year and a half ago. I grabbed the rim. That was probably like there, but I need like
You need to get to like here.
yeah, I need
I have
probably
one lifetime dunk,
that's
which
impressive.
was like the summer of 2001 at Horizon Park in Phoenix. And I know like that was my one time to shine. And it hasn't happened since, and it's never going to happen again.
So you've never
So
done it in a gym? It was outside.
it was on like a park court outside, yeah, which I think is harder
That's what I was gonna
than the
say. I think
controlled
that's
setting
harder.
of a gym.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I could always dunk like a ladies' ball,
Yep.
but you
So
have
you
to
can
be able
like
to get
because
to
you can
here,
grip
and
it.
you have to have a solid grip on it.
Yeah.
But I think at this point in my life, it's probably not going to happen again.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's kind of what I'm wondering for myself as well, if it'll ever happen. That lifelong dream, I tell you. But all
yeah.
right, final question. Final question is, all right, in math, statistics, actuarial science, we've got theorems, we've got actuarial phenomenons. What's like the your favorite either theorem or strange actuarial data thing that's come up, or something cool in coding that you would say is your all-time nerdy favorite thing?
Well, like I mentioned, like when I was in college, I had that little red proofs book that just I still have nightmares about. So I don't really live in the world of theorems, and I probably couldn't quote any, and that's probably shame on me. But
Joe
what I've
Sato would be very
yeah,
disappointed in you.
Professor Joe's gonna yell at me. The thing that most folks don't really understand, especially in the health world, I think this is not necessarily true in other actuarial fields, but the fanciest math that I've done at work is like college algebra. Everything we do, at least maybe some advanced stats, regressions and stuff like that, but everything seems to be a new problem that COVID-19 happens and you have no model that can predict what's going to go on. Everything is problem solving, logic, like judgment, knowing. This is another thing, like you may have a data set, but it may be bogus. How do you know if you're going to get a good or bad conclusion out of something and actually be able to use it? So the mindset might be, oh, well, there are these cool mathematical things that just give you an answer. And I remember when I was younger being frustrated because you can't just do something and get a number everyone's going to agree to. You have to look at the information. You have to use judgment. You have to massage it. You have to come up with something you think is right, but then also realize that this is still a business in the world. And if you think a number is 100, but somebody else thinks it's 105 and they have to take that, well, you got to meet in the middle. And so the applications of things become much more important than the theory, which you may still run into those kind of things on a day-to-day, not a day-to-day, but on a random basis. But I think that at least in my personal experience, mathematical applications are few and far between. It's just like logic. Can you
Yep.
rationalize and try to solve a problem, not tying it back to a theory and stuff? So I'm a bad person for that question, so I apologize.
No, that's a great answer, though. I was actually thinking about actuarial science in general, and I feel like it's similar to painting a house, where it's like with painting a house, you have tons of prep work, right? You gotta like clean the walls, you gotta tape off things, you gotta do all this stuff, and probably 80% of the work is there, maybe 20% of the work is painting. Whereas same thing with actuarial, a lot of it's getting the data ready, getting the data cleaned up, all that kind of stuff, and then your actual analysis may not even involve some really advanced statistical theory. Like it might be like the hardest part might have just been getting the data to a spot where you can look at it and add a couple numbers together. Maybe that's the case.
Yeah, and sometimes you're paying that house, and it adds a story to it. And you
Yeah,
plan for that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so, I think the biggest skill that somebody can have is honestly like problem solving and humility. Like knowing that even though you've got these great foundations, you're probably going to be wrong more often than not. And
yep,
if you understand that and work toward those weaknesses, then you can usually figure something out that's stronger. But
yep,
people struggle sometimes with thinking that they have the answer
yep.
and thinking that's the only way it has to go. And that humility is something that you kind of develop over time in many cases.
Definitely. All right, I know you got to jump over to another call. We were gonna try to end earlier, and here it is at 10:52. So, Kyle, thank you so much for jumping on. Um, I enjoyed it, and hope everyone else did. Uh, and we will see you all next time.
Thanks, Paul. Talk
Thanks.
to you soon.
Talk to you soon.